Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for the Brand Tracking Tech Showcase. To kick us off here, we've got Lenny to just kind of give a brief overview and let you know what we can expect to see today. So Lenny, I will hand it on over to you.
Thanks, Bridget, and hi, everybody. Welcome to this edition of our Tech Showcase series. And today we're going to be talking about brand tracking. So, brand tracking tech goes beyond streamlining current brand management. That's going to be our theme as we kind of dive in. Now, if you're familiar with my little rambles before our tech showcases, the goal here is before our presenters come on and talk about their solutions to give you kind of our perspective of the category itself and the things that you need to know to be able to process what you're about to hear from everybody else. So now with all expectations set, let's jump in. So first, talk about brand tracking, and we refer to it as this one thing. It's brand tracking, and to an extent, that's true. The business issue is to track brand performance, et cetera, et cetera. But it takes many forms. It fundamentally is about measuring your market perceptions of your brand over time. Uh, it is tracking, so it is suggests repetition. If it is repetitive, that means it can be automated, and that is certainly where we are today. But there are so many different ways to tackle this issue, and it can be different by brand manager or the brand itself. And what are your priorities and what are you trying to achieve? So, if we think about this now from the automation perspective, which doesn't always lend itself towards customization, uh, the challenge that everybody has tried to work through is to think like a brand manager. So, to build the solutions that would be able to give the bulk of the information that a brand manager is primarily looking for, track specific types of information, follow a very specific process, enable quick and clear communication of results. And we don't want to move away too much from that unless it's expanding that, not limiting it. So it's a fine line that as an industry, we walk in thinking about the topic, and certainly the suppliers who are providing solutions walk in developing solutions to address the issue. So think about kind of the traditional way. A basic approach would be generally survey based. Um, it's identifying the appropriate audience that are familiar with the brand itself. It's the analysis of the survey data. And over time, we're comparing concepts like awareness, knowledge, perception, consideration, purchase, repurchase, willingness to recommend. That's kind of the traditional metrics, the key variables that are baked into brand tracking overall. As we think about how do we take that and think about the technology, the benefits have been that it could streamline that process and enhance the results. We can automate the surveys, we can track metrics that the manager hadn't thought about, like in baking in and integrating social media or search engine use or digital shelf data. So there's technology has enabled us to be able to expand the type of information that is relevant within the brand tracking process to give a more holistic view. And of course, technology has also given us new ways to analyze the data and present the results. So it's come a long way from the old days of 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. And hopefully, the result of all of that innovation and looking at this kind of holistic view is that it gives us the power to have new ahas for it to move away from simply kind of a KPI type process into something that really drives real value and insights and growth within the brand overall. So bottom line, as we're thinking through this, the objectives dictate the data. So, what are we trying to measure? Not everybody is going to want to look at all those different components that we just said. Maybe the category doesn't support a strong social media presence. Maybe it's a B2B category, for instance. So, we've got to make sure that if we're thinking about the right solution, that it addresses this holistic view of what are our data needs. Fundamentally, does it cover the topics that we need to understand? And are the data sources fit for purpose? For instance, survey data can have very specific designs, but unless we're integrating non-conscious measurement, we may not get any emotional component, which is relevant certainly to brand tracking. Social media can give us some sense of emotion through sentiment analysis, but there's not really an experimental design. So those are just two examples of the trade-offs that we need to be thinking about overall as we're evaluating the solutions. And then the sample. So let's not forget that. It is fundamental to research. Are we trying to identify brand purchasers, ex-customers, overall brand awareness, would consider? Is it an underperforming segment? So maybe there's been social or other changes that where it used to be dominant and now it is not so much. Is it a high volume category or slow? Let's say consumer electronics, TVs, for instance, versus any CPG category, right? There's lots of different components that would change how we think about what is our objective. Bottom line, it's not necessarily one size fits all. Now, let's think about the platforms. As mentioned, there are different data sources that are relevant. Basically, there's 5 data sources that can traditionally inform brand tracking: surveys, custom surveys, syndicated surveys. Those solutions exist, can be very appropriate. Social media, search engine usage, and digital shelves. So those are all discrete data sources. They all have pros and cons. They all offer different elements of information that are relevant to understanding the brand, depending upon the category that the brand is in, as we just discussed. Let's talk about each one of those. So custom surveys. This is the way we've been doing this for a long time, all the way back to the telephone days. You can control it. You understand which topics are covered, how they're covered, whom they're covered. Generally, the question types are around brand awareness, consideration, maybe ratings on brand attributes. Could include questions about competitors, and usually have some type of NPS score within a representative sample, and that's kind of baked into the survey model. It's pretty much the core way. If you think about the leaders around brand tracking, companies that have really established basically data currency with their solutions that focus on this specific category. It's been very structured, very focused, and very controlled. And that'll mean in any derogatory way controlled, because it's experimental. We can actually do this and replicate it, and that's how we develop benchmarks and norms, and those things are important as well. Then that goes into syndicated surveys. The difference here is that you're sacrificing the ability to have some customization in that level of control. Fundamentally, the company that is offering the syndicated service, they have built what they consider to be the ideal solution. It's usually a massive sample size because it's not just focused on one specific category or one brand. You're looking at across entire categories. Sometimes they do have kind of an omnibus feature so that you can do some level of customization. Generally, the subscribers define the sample and select the questions to analyze. So that gives you some flexibility on the back end. So there's this massive data set that's looking at 5 key categories and all the brands in that category. And then analytically, you can go in and look at your specific brand or comparison to competitors in that brand. The key benefit is that it's less expensive generally. So know that. They tend to be almost always on. So the surveying is going in waves on a constant basis. The reporting is all there. It's fairly predefined. You're bypassing the needs to design and go through custom analysis. You can go through flex up and flex down. So if your business is adding on new brands, new products, then you can flex up and down and look at that overall. They generally do have proprietary metrics, so like benchmarks and normative data. They're usually pretty easy to integrate with other types of data. So let's say forecasting. And as the company, the supplier is evolving to meet more business opportunities, then the solution does as well. So they do a lot of the heavy lift, and you trust that they're going to give that. An example, although not necessarily brand tracking, but think about Nielsen with media ratings, right? Nielsen has been the dominant preferred model for media ratings for a long time because they have specialized in that. It's not just them. There's ComScore, there's Ipsos. Everybody has their own piece of that. But generally, when people think about media rating, you think about Nielsen because Nielsen invested the resources necessary to keep innovating and evolving and to meet the needs of their clients on that. Very similar idea when we're thinking about brand tracking as those types of companies. Social media, there was certainly a lot of buzz at the time that it would replace research. Nope, meaning fundamental research. And I just made an amateur mistake. My phone rang. Apologies for that, guys. So there's many years I've been doing this, and I still sometimes forget to mute the sound. The interesting thing about social media is that it is fresh and novel information. You really kind of never know what you're going to get. You do get brand mentions, maybe not across the board for every type of product, which is a limitation. You get some sentiment on positive, negative. It's a really great early warning system, and I'm sure that you could all think about what you think of as brand mistakes that have occurred over the last decade. And think, boy, that company, they really should have paid attention to that before they committed all of their resources to that particular initiative. Several come to mind over the past few years. The example I always go to personally was New Coke, which ages me, obviously, but in the 80s when Coca-Cola launched New Coke and went away from Coke Classic, there were lots of implications for their brand. And I'll bet that they wish that there had been social media analytics then because they would have got an early warning that it wasn't going over so well. So lots of interesting pieces that you can get that, but you're sacrificing control. You're sacrificing experimental design. It may be limited to certain platforms. And of course, we also know that within social media platforms, there are problems of authenticity. There are problems of bots, just as there are in other arenas. So we're not always necessarily getting the true voice of consumers, and you got to find them. So there's just because if you have a high propensity or high usage brand, it may be easier. But if you have something a little more specialized, then it can be more difficult. So lots of trade-offs. Fundamentally, though, I think the social media is a valuable input. It's complementary, and it should be part of the consideration set. You do get the continuous monitoring. It's finding the fit for purpose component here on where it fits as a relevant data source within your overall strategy to understand your brand. Search engine results, again, instant access, fresh data, as often as Google or Bing or whoever has updated their information. You look at how often your brand is searched compared to competitors. That's certainly useful from a competitive intel. You can look at keywords and geography that gives contextual clues and how to optimize maybe brand awareness for your product. You can see trending data, of course. A lot of this is baked into either external solutions or within the search platforms themselves. And it certainly you're getting a wider population. So there is the possibility of discovering that there's something new. I'll even give you a story that we were back in my Rockhopper days. Well, I'll just name the company. I think it's okay. Kimberly Clark came to us and they had created a line of cleaning supplies for janitorial. And they discovered via social media and search that this actually very specific cloth that they had produced for janitorial work was sought after by car buffs because that cloth was ideal for shining and waxing cars. So there was a whole new category of buyer that they didn't even know about. They designed a product and they discovered that via this type of more open source information. And then from there, they baked that in, decided to kind of track the brand, obviously in a more formalized way within that specific category. So I was thinking about that as a pretty neat example of this, how this works. And now digital shelves. This is interesting. This is kind of real world, somewhat real world experiments. You get it from online retailers, so you can understand what's happening, let's say, on Amazon or whatever the online retail platform you're using. You get trend reporting. You'll get observational data such as out-of-date product descriptions or images, retailer-specific pricing, keywords. That is really close to that zero moment of truth from when people are making the purchase decisions. Increasingly, I think that we'll have this in brick and mortar stores as well. It already does exist, but as brick and mortar stores overall adopt more digital centric buying solutions in store. I'm thinking of some of the Amazon stores that exist where you're kind of tracking your packages, scanning them as you go. We'll get that in both digital and real world. So not necessarily a replacement for brand perception, for instance, but certainly a key piece of understanding what's happening from brand performance, especially in your competitive set. All right, so here's a few things that we suggest that you explore as you're evaluating the solutions that you're about to see and others. Think about your pricing. What's your budget? What are the available metrics, including your ability to customize your own if there's some very specific pieces that are unique that you want to understand? Your ability to define and select populations. Again, if you have a niche category, then Gen Pop may not necessarily be the overall best solution unless you're doing something at massive scale. What's the reporting look like? What's the format? What is involved there? What's the frequency? What does that dashboarding solution look like? How much support do you get? Is there consulting? Do you need somebody to help you think through what's the right solution for you and what does the data mean? And even more importantly, what do you do with that data? Some solutions are just solutions and they don't have that component. And any other features which apply to specific types of platforms. So all of those things are important considerations. Pricing, you can see fee per month, fee per response, like kind of CPI, a graduated scale based on volume. It can be very customized. You'll get free trials in some cases, but those are generally going to be very limited in the type of information that you get. And there are some services that are entirely free, like search engine. So understand what your overall budget is and where this combination of features and capabilities fit within your budget. All right, metrics. So which ones are really important for you? Many companies still really swear by NPS. Generally, you're probably only going to get that via surveys. It's a question that you ask, willingness to recommend. You may be able to back into it. I know there's some solutions within social media that do that based upon ratings and reviews. It's not quite the same as asking willingness to recommend. Search frequency, again, it depends on where you're getting it from. It's only going to be on search platforms. Generally, companies can get that via API connections into that, usually with some type of cost. Thinking about platforms like Google Analytics, for instance, they can be baked in. But don't think that it's one size fits all. So think even about NPS. There may be complementarity between two different versions of getting to the same idea. They may look at computing the results in a slightly different way. the base populations could be different. Brand loyalty, brand equity, those are kind of synonyms, but they do have distinct elements that feed into brand tracking. So understanding, what you get in that way and how to calculate what those things look like. And again, I encourage you to think about the ability to customize. So even think about where we are today in the world where, kind of AI is taking everything by storm. It has a long tail of effects that will have cultural and behavioral change for the population. So questions that we were asking 2 to 3 years ago about, brand and product experience may be changing now, and you need to factor that in. Is their ability to kind of think through changing to kind of real world macro dynamics. They can go back to 2020. Things changed like that, and many norms were not relevant anymore. We had to redevelop new norms because there were things that simply changed so rapidly from a behavior standpoint. So, think about adaptability to the future. We don't know what the future holds. We certainly can reasonably assume things will continue to change pretty quickly one way or the other. Populations, understand who's in the data, who's missing. Again, niche category. You may have to do something that's very customized because we're not capturing it in a broader macro solution. And quality. So I encourage you to ask your supplier about data quality. We'll be doing another tech showcase on data quality here soon. I encourage you to attend. There's challenges because people are people, and they look for ways to be able to game systems. And the speed, efficiency, and cost that improvements we've gotten from a sample standpoint over the past few years, utilize the technology, have also created opportunities for people to be able to game that system. So be aware of that. Just check to make sure that you know exactly what's in your sample and where it's coming from. And again, same thing, social media with bots. Even the search data, there are bot farms and click farms that can skew social media data because they're basically driving advertising fraud. So be aware and just think through those things. Bottom line is your sample. How well does it represent your core customers, triers, non-triers, whatever way you're kind of thinking about the universe? High volume versus low volume, active versus others, and in social media, be aware of the phenomenon of silent listeners. The reality is that I think the last metric I saw, for instance, on Twitter was that the tweets, active tweets, or whatever it's called now, it's still going to be Twitter in my mind, even though it's X. Apologies, if somebody from X is on here. It's a branding issue. About 20% of all activity is really driven. I'm sorry, 100% of all activity on Twitter is driven by about 20% of the users. That does not mean that only 20% are active. It just means that some larger population, let's say 80%, just for round numbers, are occasional tweeters, but active watchers, listeners. So, just factor that in as you're thinking through this. All right, the reporting content, this is important because that's where the rubber meets the road. We're collecting this information, but it needs to be actionable, and you need to communicate it within your organization so that it can help move the needle on the business and help drive growth. So understand, what are the frequency options? How often do you need it? How often do your key stakeholders and colleagues in your company need it? Can it be customized? Maybe you have a proprietary format in how you deliver information within your company. So what does that look like? Is it just a canned report? What features may arrive soon that you want to make sure that you have access to? An example currently would be the ability to summarize open ends utilizing generative AI. So we're all kind of in that that world now. So some legacy solutions may not have embraced that yet. I'm sure they will, but they may not be there. Some newer emerging platforms have already adopted some of those technologies and have that ability to look at survey data, but with open-ended responses and utilizing AI to summarize the results. So just examples to kind of think about. All right, other things to think about, and we're near the end. Customer support, not it's technology often, and sometimes technology just doesn't work the way we expect it to for whatever reason, either user error or there's some type of occasional technical glitch. Maybe an upgrade didn't work well. We're recording this at the end of February, and last week I'm an AT&T customer, and I didn't have service last week while that happened because apparently they were uploading a some type of update and it didn't go well, and therefore many people, like myself included, were without software, or without access to wireless. So things like that happen. Find out, is it just a series of FAQs or a chatbot for service, or do you have somebody that you can talk to? Understand that, because only you understand yourself on what you're looking for. Are you looking for consultants, or are you just looking for technology? Again, different companies take different approaches there. There's some solutions that are just basically SaaS, software as a service, and they don't build in much consultancy or support by design. It's not a criticism, it's the business model, and they deliver a great service. There's no ifs, ands, buts about it. Others go when there's more customization and more options to kind of reconfigure things. They function more as consultants. So just think through that. And of course, these other features, as I just mentioned, an example could be, what's the plan, the roadmap for incorporating advanced tools like generative AI, and where's that going to go? Search engine results, this is probably the part that is going to be the most interesting because of the current era. The reality is that all the search engines are rapidly incorporating generative AI, and that is going to change the nature of search in a variety of ways. And we're still trying to figure out what that looks like. We're seeing some misfires happen in the market. If anybody saw the rollout of Gemini, Google Gemini last week, there were problems with it. So be aware that whatever we do today may rapidly change because technology is changing, and understand how you're going to adapt to those technological changes from the companies themselves. And I think that actually wraps it up. So crammed a whole lot into that, but hopefully it's helpful. Hopefully it gives you some sense of how to evaluate and think through not only the topic, but the companies that you are about to see. We are thrilled that they are here, and we're thrilled that you're here as well. So that's it for me. Thanks a lot, and enjoy the rest of this Greenbook Tech Showcase. Bye-bye.